Let's see. So welcome to our discussion on the implications of COVID-19 on digitalization, sustainability, and the future of work. And thank you to the Copenhagen Fashion Summit for giving us this opportunity. My name is Harsh Saini, and I head up sustainability at the Fund Group. For those of you not familiar with the Fund Group, we have a diverse portfolio of businesses, including Li & Fung, which operate across the global supply chain in trading, logistics, distribution and retail, and a range of consumer goods, including cosmetics, furniture, and apparel and footwear, of course. The pandemic has had an unparalleled impact on all industry. It has hit the fashion industry particularly hard and has forced drastic changes in how we work and manage supply chains. Digitalization and technology have proven increasingly necessary as a result of lockdowns and social distancing. And we will explore some of these key impacts of the pandemic and the industry's adoption of digital solutions today. Joining us today are leaders from industry and labor, Deepika, Rana, and Susan Hayter. Deepika is Li & Fung's Chief Customer Officer. Her focus is on leveraging Li & Fung's scale and integrating its diverse services to create a customer-centric offering, driving synergies and championing innovative solutions that add value to Li & Fung's customers and vendors. Susan is the Senior Technical Advisor on the Future of Work at the ILO and the lead author of the Global Commission report on the future of work titled Work for a Brighter Future. Her focus is on the changing nature of work and production and implications for labor relations and labor market governance. Our presenters will share their views with some slides, and we encourage you to share your questions via Slido. Susan and Deepika, pleasure to have you both here today. Let's start with Susan first. Can you provide us an overview of your vision of the future of work and how the pandemic has impacted this vision? Specifically, what are the implications for technology and digitalization?
Wonderful. Right, well, thank you, Harsh, and thank you to the Copenhagen Fashion Summit. As you said, prior to the health crisis, I was the lead author at the ILO on a report on the future of work issued by a group of eminent individuals from different backgrounds in different parts of the world. Their shared vision, I'd say, and that of governments, workers, and employers from all parts of the world who came together in June last year in Geneva. It's strange to think that there was a time we were able to do that, when they adopted a declaration for the future of work, was that we need to take action if we want to shape a human-centered future of work. This means putting technology at the service of human progress and not the other way around. With the pandemic, I'm afraid that future has arrived sooner than anticipated. And we've seen the rapid acceleration of automation and the digitalization of work. Companies have had to ramp up their deployment of digital technologies at a time when it's simply not possible to travel around the world for product development. And work patterns, work practices, and workplaces have changed. And we've seen the increased digital surveillance at work with associated privacy concerns. So in my mind, the need for action to shape a human-centered future of work is more pressing than ever. In the apparel industry, digital technologies certainly allowed designers and office workers to maintain work and income continuity, but sewers do not have the luxury to work remotely. Apart from the risks to their own health, their incomes were immediately affected by declines in retail activity. Sorry, back to the previous slide. In retail activity, falling demand, the cancellation of orders, and the reconfiguration of supply chains. The ILO's own analysis shows that garment and textile supply chains are especially vulnerable to the collapse in demand for goods, with 73 million jobs considered high risk. To put this in context, in Bangladesh, only 49% of garment workers were working in the month of April. And this rebounded to 88% in May, but with average income reductions of 42% per month because of working hour reductions. We will be releasing a brief tomorrow called Ripple Effects, which focuses on these supply chain effects. But the fact is that countries with low-tech infrastructure are far less able to reap the benefits of technology and digitalization to give them the resilience that is needed. In the midst of the pandemic, a human-centered future of work for these suppliers and workers is going to require joint action to address the devastating impacts of the pandemic and the economic crisis. And the recent call to action, I think, is an important starting point. But going forward, we're also going to need to ensure that pricing structures cover the costs of decent work. We're going to need to make sure that the predictability and timely payment of orders and adequate wage protection is secured, and that safe working conditions, which may require factories to make adjustments for social distancing, become acceptable. Digital technology can, of course, help us in all these areas because it can track who's doing what. Accurate forecasting and calendar management enabled by digital technologies can impact positively on excessive overtime. And we're seeing an encouraging uptick in the digitalization of pay with better compliance and wage protection. Harsh, can you go on to the next slide? To inspire and leverage these efforts, the ILO recently created a transformative tech for decent work innovation facility. It links ILO experts, workers and employer organizations, regulators, enterprises, universities, civil society, and technologists to come together to ideate, pilot, and scale solutions to advance decent work. TT for Decent Work, or Transformative Tech for Decent Work, is currently exploring a variety of technologies relevant to the garment industry that can be leveraged to support agendas for sustainability and decent work. Areas such as the scaling of digital payments to enhance access to social protection and protect wages, the use of geolocation and supply chain mapping to enhance traceability, virtual reality and sensor technology to enhance the detection of OSH hazards and help mitigate COVID transmission, and predictive analytics and machine learning to help public regulators and inspectors better target interventions at likely non-compliant enterprises. So I think, as you'll see, we're not necessarily talking about cutting edge technologies, but really about seeking to leverage existing technologies in new ways to deliver a human-centered future of work. Thank you, Harsh.
Thank you, Susan. That's a really, really important framing of some of the issues out there around what's happening with the pandemic and the need to move into a higher technology future. Maybe we can turn to Deepika now. Can you help us understand what Leon means by the future or supply chain of the future, and how are you supporting your customers to source better while also addressing some of these increasing social and environmental impacts that we're seeing around us all the time?
Thank you, Harsh, and thank you for the introduction. In 2016, Lian Fung unveiled our new strategy, which was focused on speed, innovation, and digitization. This was really, at that time, intended to enable Lian Fung and our customers and vendors react quickly to changes in the retail environment, as well as quickly to any disruption or any requirement of business resilience that might happen. At that time, we could not have anticipated how critical and important these capabilities would become for business continuity, environmental resilience, and the human impact of our supply chain. We've all experienced disruption due to COVID-19. The fact that we are having the summit virtually is an example of that. But in the apparel trade, the product development process has been particularly disrupted because designers like to touch and feel, see garments, see their drape, look at how the rooms are, and also look at competitive activities in one room with all the garments placed around. Now, without the ability of the designers to travel, they've actually been handcuffed, and their usual sources of inspiration, the product development trips, the fairs for design and product development have all been completely reduced and they've been stopped under the lockdown. So none of these options exist today. So now, without the design teams having access to physical samples, digital samples and digitization of the supply chain becomes of critical importance to enable designers and retailers to review their lines, see the product that they're buying, and also visit suppliers virtually while sitting at the other end of the world. And then in addition to that, unprecedented lockdowns also meant that they don't have access to their sales data, they don't have as much access to all of their data, and therefore they're relying more and more on digital tools. So all of these challenges actually required that the digital solutions we put into place earlier had to be completely enhanced and speeded up, to use wrong grammar, but we had to actually react very quickly. So while the supply chain and the retailers were loath to really accept digitization very quickly, right now, it isn't a choice. And it is the only tool that not only helps environment, but also helps continuity of the business and retail, and also helps us provide our customers who are shopping more and more online the images and product that they really want. So what we found is the Li & Fung suite of tools, which you see in front of you today, are really enabling this in a far more critical and continuous fashion, and also in a very, very sustainable fashion than we could have ever imagined before. So the trend platform, that is number one, actually looks at all the trends, provides data of the trends that are relevant to retailers in terms of sales, in terms of customer feedback, in terms of what is trending and what is not. So for example, if you have a curvy fit jean, it actually gives the customer feedback online. It talks about what the fit is that the customer likes the most, what the inseam should be, what the waistband should be, and it provides all the data at their fingertips that would have normally been a very, very analog process. Collaborate, on the other hand, is a platform that allows the designers on one end of the world and the vendors on the other end to actually collaborate virtually, look at their designs, see what they want changed, make annotations online. And then we move on to a product that is picked, and the digital product development element of it actually drives that. But the most important part is number 4, which takes the ultimate consumer feedback and gives it virtually, immediately on a product. So for example, if the blue jegging that you see on the extreme left of number 3 photograph is something that they don't like the color, they don't like the way the pink is placed on it, they give feedback so quickly that the designers and the vendors can enable changes well before they put it into production, and also before they actually make samples for it. So what this really means is a reduction of waste, a reduction of fuel, a reduction of usage of water, and a complete efficiency in the supply chain. So coming to the impact on the environment, actually, we made experiment with 850 styles that we switched to 3D samples. And we realized that the impact on carbon emissions, the impact on water was exponential. And even more than that, if you look at how you're packaging them, you virtually get all of the packaging approved, the impact on the environment is huge. So there are many, many such documents and data that we have gathered to look at the impact of the digital renderings, the digital sampling, as well as digitally analyzing what the raw material requirements are well in advance, training the vendors, enabling them to set up a tracing so that they can be digitally resilient is something that that has gone a long way in driving these sustainable solutions in the supply chain. And then in denim as well, The EIM measures that have been instituted by Genealogia, and then the Higg Index and carbon emission reductions have really enabled us to gather data on the positive impact that digitization leaves in our world, which is something we really need. COVID has really enabled our world to relook at the way we've been scarring it in terms of environmental abuse, and allowed us to breathe again with the enforced lockdown and see what we need to do to improve sustainability and improve our environment. And so we're proud that our digital processes have really helped us with that. Thanks, Harsh. So what the McKinsey and GFA's Fashion on Climate report outlines is several key levers that address the climate impact on the fashion industry. So in this chart, what you see is the abatement cost curve. We've circled some of the levers that can be significantly impacted by improved digitization. The accelerated adoption of our digital solutions is key to our efforts to reduce the environmental footprint on the production process. And the solutions support our environmental resilience goals in a few key ways. A more responsive, demand-driven supply chain reduces waste, results in accurate decisions, fewer markdowns, and reduced rates of return, and therefore far reduces wasted product and destroyed product. Digital product development eliminates the need for physical sampling, like I've said earlier, and the associated material waste, material sourcing, transportation, carbon emissions, shipment or air shipping of samples to reach the retailers on time is also greatly enhanced. This reduces the environmental impact of the sampling process by almost 55% on an average, with the potential to reduce it by over 90% in the coming years. So through the development of our digital platforms, we've witnessed not just positive environmental impacts, but also social positive impacts. For example, there are clear impacts for workers when development and purchasing practices are better managed. And then the digital product development reduces the incidence of delays from the development process, improves forecasting and reliability. And as a result, we find that key labor issues such as working hours, overtime, abuse in terms of adding non-contract workers are all greatly reduced and or almost eliminated. Over to you, Harsh.
Thank you. That was a really good sort of deep dive into some of the great work that you're doing on digitization. So I think we can, if I can just encapsulate what you've both said, is that the digitalization has moved from used to be a competitive advantage to a necessity now as a result of the pandemic. And the adoption of key solutions is accelerating across the board. So this presents a lot of opportunities for improved environmental and social impact management, as well as obviously a lot of challenges for us as well. So I think that was a really good share there. I'm just going to come out of this. Okay, right. Slides are finished. So we're going to just do a little bit on some questions. Let's have a look. So maybe first of all, I think we know one of the things that you talked about, Deepika, is the use of data. Big data has become quite a buzzword, and it's not always clear, I think probably to a lot of our viewers here, on how the industry can capitalize on this capability. Can you expand a little bit on how you and Li and Fung and other companies are utilizing data more effectively to improve sustainability specifically?
Sure. Thanks, Harsh. So Li and Fung has developed and implemented a couple of key tools that leverage data. And as I spoke about earlier, our Trend Engine platform is a really exciting solution that combs various areas of the web for insights on customer preferences. And it really pulls data that we wouldn't normally realize, like a certain color that customers prefer or a certain finish that customer prefers. And therefore, we do understand how consumers are responding to what's on the web very easily. We also see that there are great business indicators and returns that are also environmentally very taxing. So if you use the business indicators to reduce the returns, the impact on the environment is greatly reduced. We see it today on the net, a lot of data that can quickly point to what a consumer's preference is. So if you build that into your supply chain, the wastage, the reiteration, the constant rebooting of product, as well as waste associated with shipping, trial and error is greatly reduced.
Okay. Susan, is there anything that you would like to add around the use of data, and specifically maybe around predictive analytics to isolate or identify non-compliant enterprises?
Sure. So I think one of the really exciting areas, certainly for the ILO, is to be able to make this connection between labor administrations, which are often labor inspectors, which have very limited resources, and the incredible data that is being collected in supply chains, in the monitoring of supply chains, and to try and use data on compliance from different sources, I would say, to be able to support labor inspectors to really know where to put their limited resources. And there is some work being done, and I mean, not, as I said before, I think not very sophisticated in terms of data analytics and the science around that, but some work being done to support, in Brazil, for example, labor inspectors to target places that are most likely to have forced labor, for example, so that they can do spot checks there. So I think that's an exciting and interesting area of work. There are also some interesting applications which are allowing workers to report anonymously, and for that to also be integrated into that data monitoring.
So maybe a question to both of you: how is all of this helping transparency? That's another key issue for all of us working in the industry. How do we use this data as we're getting more and more data? How can we move towards greater transparency? And what are some of the drawbacks out there for a better adoption of digital solutions? And I would say both for sort of the downstream and also for the upstream players.
I think if you look at sustainable product, it's becoming a really good. It's driving a lot of demand, especially from the younger consumers. Sustainability, the impact on the environment, is what they look at when they want to buy something. I mean, the days of them looking at a brand name and buying it are reducing now, are long gone actually. So if you have data that accompanies a product that tells you how sustainable it is, where it's manufactured, what is the carbon footprint, it makes a big difference on how it sells. And you cannot label a product as sustainable without having the supporting data. So the data chain goes all the way back to the supply chain, the vendors, how they're manufacturing the product in each minute part. And between the Higg index and the other indices, they are really very, very clear on how you should capture that data. So for the ultimate consumer, that data is a big driver of their buying decisions. And if they shop online, it is very clearly visible for them to see. So that's an example of how important the transparency in the supply chain as well as the data is, and how it will affect and impact consumers' buying decisions.
Yeah. Susan, maybe a very quick response from you. We have about a minute left.
Right. Okay. I think I touched on some of the issues around buying practices, which existed obviously before COVID, and which I think there are huge opportunities to address through very simple applications of technology. Digital technology certainly enables us to track who's doing what and to plan far better. But it also opens up opportunities for companies to share their sourcing data, to share, and we know that that's been an issue in supply chains. So I think, you know, the opportunities that transparency creates, the ability to share that sourcing data, and to then benefit from the planning, this, you know, the predictability and sustainability of supply chains, not only for the environment but also ultimately for workers.
Thank you. That was great. I think we're out of time. So I want to say thank you to both of you for such a great sharing here. And a lot of opportunities out there for us to do things better going forward, even though we've had to really do things very differently in a very short space of time due to the pandemic right now. So thank you very, very much.
Thanks, Harsh.
Wonderful. Thank you. All the best. Thank you.
Bye.